This podcast is supported by the film Emilia Perez, the most Oscar-nominated film of the year. 13 nominations, including Best International Feature Film, Best Director Jacques Audiard, and Best Picture of the Year. The Times calls it a gorgeous musical epic from the French maestro Jacques Audiard. Winner of 4 Golden Globes and 3 Critics' Choice Awards, including Best International Feature and Best Original Song El Mal. Collider raves, Emilia Perez is a one-of-a-kind cinematic feat.
Hi, everybody. It was a busy award season weekend in Los Angeles, and you can tell I was right in the middle of it because I lost my voice trying to talk to all of these Oscar nominees in some very crowded rooms. And luckily, my guest today, the author of the New York Times Projectionist column, Kyle Buchanan, he knows even more about award season than I do, will join me to break out what was a very good weekend for Sean Baker's Anora and probably some other films too. I'll let Kyle do as much of the talking as I can, I promise. Hi, I'm Katey Rich, and this is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. Kyle, first of all, thank you for tolerating me as I sound like this. I saw you in person a few times. You were tolerant in person. Please be my voice and just explain to everybody everything about the Oscar race. That's okay, right?
It's great to meet you, RFK Jr. I'm a big fan.
I'm sure he has terrible Oscar takes, don't you think?
Can you imagine?
Yeah. So when I asked you to come on, I knew that we would have all these weekend of award shows to talk about, and we're going to go back and talk about Emilia Perez and scandals and fans and everything, but what a huge weekend for one film, really. I mean, there were other things in there too, but you were there at Critics' Choice, Directors Guild, and Producers Guild. So you watched Sean Baker give 3 speeches, and Anora just kind of suddenly become the front runner that I don't know that everyone had written it off. I think a lot of people were wondering about it, but what a comeback, right?
I mean, it got points on the board exactly what it needed to, and it got the right points on the board.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of an unusual situation because since the Globes happened and then everything went into shutdown mode because of the fires and all the other award shows got delayed, it did kind of feel like the race was preserved in amber for a moment. Mm-hmm. And because Anora was totally shut out at the Globes, maybe that created the impression that it did not have the juice. I had to remind myself that in December when I was writing about this race, you know, the 2 movies that everybody told me that they were voting for as their number 1 pick were Emilia Perez and Anora. So when we came to DGAs and PGAs, you know, there were a lot of big questions, but I think that all those questions were kind of informed by the Globes hangover and the last 2 tumultuous weeks of the race. So it was questions about Emilia Perez. It was questions about Brady Corbet and The Brutalist, but maybe not Anora because people just, I don't know, that Globes afterglow had not extended to it.
Do you think that the 6 Oscar nominations for Anora were also kind of a red herring? Like, it's a small movie, $6 million budget. It wasn't always going to be a juggernaut in visual effects. I feel like I got distracted by that a little bit.
It got nominated for everything you'd want it to get nominated for. And not every movie could say that. You know, Conclave can't say that.
Sure. When
I was talking to people at Critics' Choice in the reception before the awards began, people were saying, well, if it's not Emilia, then what is it? Mm-hmm. And you know, people were touting Wicked, let's say. And Wicked doesn't have a director or a screenplay nomination. These things are not unheard of. You can make new Oscar history, but we haven't had a movie that could win picture without those things since Grand Hotel. People are saying Brutalist. And I keep saying, not to sound totally reductive, but it's true. Please show me a female voter who's voting that number 1. I have not spoken to one. Mm-hmm. It's funny because the online vibe would have you believe that Emilia Perez was too polarizing to win Best Picture. Certainly, if social media were voting for Emilia Perez, it would be. But in the real world of Oscar voters, it was not polarizing. All sorts of people, like a truly diverse coalition of Oscar voters were, you know, very into Emilia Perez and maybe still might be. Brutalist could not say the same. Brutalist was more polarizing. People who loved it, but it had a lot of detractors and a lot of people who just were not into it. So I was thinking to myself, well, okay, so if Emilia is not number 1, then what is what else is getting those number one votes? You know, I spoke to the Conclave team and they said their whole approach is to just, you know, cruise to victory on number twos, because I wasn't talking to people who are voting Conclave number one either. You know, everyone likes it, but do they love it? You usually have to get those number one votes. You usually have to be at least loved by a passionate segment. And that brings me back to Anora. People have loved Anora since Cannes. People continue to love Anora in the fall. People would reach out to me who I hadn't spoken to in a while because they know I'm the movie guy to talk about how much they loved Anora. You know, you can't underestimate that. And I think especially with Emilia sort of wounded at the moment, it is a no-brainer once you look back at things.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Did any of the awards this weekend have a preferential ballot the way Best Picture does at the Oscars?
Yeah, the Producers Guild.
Okay.
That's why it's thought of as such a sort of influential Best Picture precursor.
As the consensus vote,
Yeah, because it's a very big voting body that obviously has a lot of Academy members in it. They have 10 nominees and they use a preferential ballot. So it's the best possible dry run for Best Picture that you can get.
Yeah. But they also, the Producers Guild especially, is famously populist. You know, they're the ones who nominate Top Gun Maverick for Best Picture. Like, they go for 1917 instead of Parasite. So really, when I was looking at like what That's Not Amelia was going to win, I did not think it was going to be Anora. Did you?
Well, first of all, let me break down the first part of what you're saying. You're saying the Producers Guild is famously populist. Sure.
Okay.
We could also say that the Producers Guild heavily tends to pick movies that are more in line with the Oscars before they diversified their membership. Because the Producers Guild still is pretty heavily dominated by older straight white guys.
I was in that room. I saw them all. They're all in there.
Yeah. So, you know, prior to the awards, when I was just talking to other people, there was also speculation that a complete unknown could surprise there.
That was my prediction.
Because it's, you know, a more traditional film in every respect. But it didn't. It was Anora. And I think that's an indication of what I was sensing in the fall and in the late winter, which is there is a diverse coalition of people who are into Anora, and people who love Anora really love it. I note that our friend David Sims was on this podcast talking about how Anora couldn't possibly win.
He is eating his hat. He admits he did not see it coming.
I mean, it's a somewhat different movie than if you just had to create a Best Picture winner in a lab.
Sure.
But then so many of the recent Best Picture winners have been that. I think that what Oscar voters really respond to at the moment is a film that feels a little bit spiky and unusual, but then by the end, there's that same sort of like tender heart and resonant theme that you would get in a more traditional Oscar contender. And certainly that's Anora, which leads with attitude and comedy and vibes, and then ends in a place that many voters find, you know, heartbreaking and moving.
Yeah, it's got that FYC tagline, follow your heart, which is not really what I would say Anora is about, but it's close enough that it captures why you would want to vote for it. I feel like that's a really smart move on their part.
Well, the FYC tagline is always 40% about the movie and 60% about a subtle theme that is meant to indicate why you'd vote for that and not the other movie. So yes, it's saying that this is a heart-forward movie, or at least positioning it as such, which I think is clever. You know, people want to vote with their heart and not their head, and I think they typically do when it comes to the Oscars.
It also feels like there's this admiration for what they pulled off with that $6 million budget, which Sean Baker brought up in every speech, and their theatrical run, you know, the way he's been emphasizing keeping his movies in theaters. That feels like a really interesting rejoinder in this era where yet another Netflix movie is probably not going to win Best Picture. Like, he's kind of playing the hits for them, even if he made a movie that's not like what these guys would make themselves. They admire what he did to make it happen.
Well, you're very onto something there, Katey, which is I think that, and I'm not ascribing too much of a cynical motivation to this because I think he speaks very much from the heart. But I think Sean Baker this weekend proved that he's second only to Demi Moore in seizing the opportunity while making an acceptance speech to create narrative stakes that reinforce why you'd want to vote for that movie and why you'd want to keep that movie winning. You know, in the same way that Demi has now seized her chance at the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice Awards to sort of say, here are the themes of the movie, and here's why you honoring me shows that you get it, actually. You understand that, like, these themes are pernicious and and the pressure that women are under, and you're saying I'm different, which is just brilliant because like it just creates a self-reinforcing loop where it's like we're going to vote for Demi, we're going to feel great about ourselves, and then she's going to feel great.
Yep.
With Sean, he spoke really passionately, especially at the DGAs in his nominee presentation, which came about an hour and a half before the win.
Yeah, they all get to give speeches at DGAs, we're saying. So it's a good platform for every nominee, even before you get a winner.
Yes, but he did the best job, I think,
Really?
of saying something that felt very invigorating, which is he's not just paying lip service to the idea of we need to go see movies in theaters. He really, really pushes it. He did it at Critics' Choice as well. And he says specific things. He says we should demand a 90-day exclusivity window. And honestly, now's the time to be saying that. I think that's a message that really resonates with people. It's time for pushback when it comes to that. I think everybody understands innately that this collapsed theatrical window is so absurd and not helpful ultimately because it conditions the moviegoer to not go to the movies. They're about to be able to watch it at home. And yet it just kind of continues because nobody has any leverage and no one is really kind of speaking truth to power. Yeah. But I bet you if Sean Baker wins an Oscar, he's going to say something about it. And I think that's an invigorating message because a lot of people agree with him and would love him to be the one to say something so that they don't have to.
Well, and also coming a year after Christopher Nolan, who's been advocating on that on his scale. But that's like two very heavy, like theatrical experienced guys in a row to be at the front of this conversation. You can kind of tell where the industry winds are blowing, even if nobody can make the corporations do it. That's what they want it to be happening, at least. Well, and not what Netflix is doing.
There's also something to be said for being actually specific. And I'm going to... Okay, so at the DGA ceremony, there was a lot of talk, obviously, about Los Angeles and the aftermath of the fires. And there was a lot of implication, hinting, nudging that production needs to come back to Los Angeles. But the people who were speaking on stage about this would never just outright say it. There was just a lot of like, we know what we have to do. And it's like, nah, but just like, you're in a room of the most powerful people. So say specific things that they should do. Call people out and say, how many movies are you going to bring back to Los Angeles in the next year, so-and-so. And so that's what felt also so invigorating about Sean Baker being so specific about what he wants and what he thinks filmmakers should fight for and what the industry ought to do. Because if you're just kind of nudging and coaxing, then I don't think anything happens.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. I had never been to PGA before, which is where I was. And these award shows that aren't televised and are so industry heavy, they go into details about net profit participation, about tax benefits. Like it's so specifically oriented toward the industry and as FYC campaigns because there's so many voters in the room. And at PGA, there really was a lot of specific talk about LA production. You know, the producers are the ones who can actually make that deal. But it was the same thing where Jen Statsky goes up and talks about how Hacks is filmed in Los Angeles, so that's going to boost their Emmy campaign when the time comes. Like, it's not like it is on TV where Demi Moore is trying to speak to voters, but also the world and try to make a good show for the Golden Globes. It's an interesting and a different vibe, and I feel like you get a different sense of campaigns from being there.
You do. You also get a sense of who people respond to because it's not performative. It's who they want to see.
Yeah.
To that end, even though, people are talking about Anora being ascendant at the moment, could that help Mikey Madison? I just want to say that when Demi Moore came out to present at the DGAs, that room lit up like Kendrick Lamar at the Super Bowl. She got by far the biggest applause of the night as a presenter. People were psyched to see her. The vibes in the room, notably enlivened. They're just, give me more when it comes to Demi Moore.
It's just happening. Yeah, I mean...
Well, certainly it's true of Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood voters want to vote for her. The Academy is increasingly international, so you can't count out other candidates, but she absolutely has the Hollywood vote in the palm of her hand.
Yeah. I mean, to go back to Anora specifically, I had someone compare it to Oppenheimer, where it seemed like it was going to win, and then we all kind of convinced ourselves something else might happen, and then it was just a clear front runner. I'm not totally convinced Anora is the same, so obviously not the same kind of movie, but I feel like there's still some road left to go. We've got BAFTA coming up. We've got SAG coming up. Anora could just cruise through both of those, but I wonder if you also think that there could be some other winners, even if Anora does win Best Picture, that it's not going to cruise through the rest of these the same way Oppenheimer did.
Well, it's not the same sort of movie as Oppenheimer, certainly, and neither is it the same as Everything Everywhere All at Once, where those really did feel like world beaters. Even if Anora does win these few major awards, certainly it'll sort of get lumped in with those other films in retrospect as movies that won everything.
Yeah.
But at no point has it felt like the 800-pound gorilla, I would say, in the same way, certainly that Oppenheimer did. Last year, I think we all figured it would be Oppenheimer. There was no reason to doubt it. It was just that you could make a narrative that Oppenheimer was the head movie and something else might be the heart movie. We'd seen head movies lose to heart movies before.
Yes.
But Anora is a heart movie, as they keep reminding us. So I think the only reason that Anora might not take the next two big ones, which are BAFTA and SAG, is because, well, BAFTA is a somewhat different voting body. It could be an indication of what international voters prefer. I think it helps, though, that Anora has that Cannes Palme d'Or and Primatur, so it feels international in that sense.
It's the European movie and the New York movie at the same time.
That
Pretty
helps,
good combo. Mm-hmm.
You know? And with SAG, I mean, yes, obviously SAG voters love Wicked, but you want to know something funny? I was just reading Pete Hammond's sum up of the weekend. And, you know, I love Pete, and Pete is a perceptive person, but he's also kind and generous, where some of the rest of us would be withering, jaded, cynical, etc. And even Pete was like, these voters are sheep, referring to like the voters coming up. And they kind of are. I mean, like Critics' Choice, certainly.
Sure.
You know, just rubber stamping everything the Globes did, except for the random John Chu director
Anora
bit. Well, and Anora, sure. But I mean, like, as far as those same four acting winners, the Critics' Choice just relentlessly like to, you know, be led around by the Golden Globes when it comes to picking the same acting winners. So yes, absolutely. It's that voters are suggestible. It's also that voters are distracted at the moment. So if they're like, okay, these are the people, honestly, to some extent, those are the people. It's
Don't
hard
you imagine
to
them being like, wait, I don't have to watch The Brutalist? Great. Like, I can save my 4 hours. Like, you know, that's a cynical way to do it. I love The Brutalist. But, you know, you get to the point where, like, your ballot's in your hands. And you're like, oh, I've already seen Anora. I liked it. Everyone else is going to vote for it. Done.
Look, occasionally I will talk to somebody who's like, I didn't watch the movies, but I would say by and large, people are watching the movies.
Good.
At least the ones that I talk to.
Yeah. The ones who don't want, they run away from you. They don't want to be on the record having not seen the movies.
No, sometimes they'll volunteer that information. It's not brutal. Well, I mean, honestly, no, I know that Clayton spoke to, I don't know how many voters who allegedly did not watch all of The Brutalist. That's not been my experience. I talked to, you know, one significant voter who was voting for Wicked because he thought it would be good for the industry and has not seen it. But
you know what?
But people vote those ways.
I've been hearing from people who haven't seen I'm Still Here Yet. That's the one that, like, people are catching up on. I think they will watch it. But, you know, those Sony Classics movies just come out late and it takes people time to catch up with them. So, you know, if you want to believe that there's a Fernando Torres surge coming, maybe if more people are catching up to the movie, that's where it happens. I think that's going to happen, but it does seem like it's late on the list for a lot of people.
Well, that's exactly how it would happen. I mean, people are still catching up with some of the major movies.
Yeah.
I know that to be true, even though I guess I'm speaking to a more sort of like highly informed slice of the demographic, because I like to talk to people who've watched everything because they have the sort of broadest sense of what's playing, for them at least. People are still watching everything. Look, I also come to you from Los Angeles, and so many of the people I speak to are also from Los Angeles, and things have been on pause, in disarray since the fires.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe now people are somewhat less inclined to catch up with movies that they hadn't already caught up with. But I do think, I know that people who don't talk to Oscar voters, people who sort of consume this in kind of a like fun, online way. You know, their knowledge of what Oscar voters think is sometimes restricted to what they read in like brutally honest Oscar ballots or things like that. So you would think that every Oscar voter is deranged. And the truth is that only like 40% of them are. No, I'm kidding. Question mark. But no, I mean, like, people do want to take it seriously, and people have, you know, the Oscar voters at least have the screening room app where they can be catching up with movies as well. Not often. They have to be prodded to watch something. Other award shows prod them to watch something, relatives or friends, or screenings with a celebrity. Sure. But yeah. So in the case of I'm Still Here, it has an arc where, if successful, it could be somewhat like Coda. Coda almost sort of like played possum. I mean, not on purpose, but in the sense that people really did not see Coda when it came out that summer. It was sort of like a flop and didn't make waves. And it just barely made it into the Oscar races that it made it into, except for Troy Kotsur. That was like a juggernaut. He was going to win all season situation. And the fortunate thing about that is that when they started catching up to it, which a movie that they had not seen, and they'd seen Power of the Dog, they were like, oh, this is a movie that we actually love that is eliciting an emotional reaction from us. So in the case of I'm Still Here, it's a very traditionally Oscar-shaped movie. And this is a field where not everything is like that. And it's giving you a slice of what you kind of want an Oscar movie to be if you're a more traditionally minded voter. So if it's a movie that you're getting to at the very end, it's going to resonate and hit in a way where, it honestly could pick up a lot of votes. And certainly the international segment of the Oscars, meaning the non-American, non-Los Angeles vector of the Academy, is less distracted and maybe more mobilized. But it will be hard to tell because there aren't really places where that movie can tremendously overperform until the actual Oscars.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the international race between that and Emilia Perez is maybe one of the more interesting things to watch, and you're just going to have to get a vibe for it. And when it comes time to predict what's going to win that category, I don't know where I'll land. It feels like it could really go either way for those two particularly.
Well, certainly if the last few weeks have taught us anything, it's that things can really change on a dime. So I don't take any... I'm not putting any stock in getting a correct prediction right very early because
That's true.
It would feel negligent. Things can and do and will change, and it's fine to just like kind of like let things go down to the wire because they will. In so many of these cases, this is a really unusual Oscar season with so many extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, here's one more question about Anora before we talk about other winners. After Critics' Choice, I kind of said, okay, Anora was a consensus pick, but I bet that was a tight vote. And then when it goes and wins PGA and DGA, it looks very decisive. I still kind of think those votes were probably close. It's just been such a widespread season. Or do you think it was way further out ahead than we realized?
I don't know. I really don't.
Take a guess. Predict.
I think Anora was in a good position with both. Obviously... Well, okay, so I guess the question is, if Emilia had been at full steam, do you think it would have taken either of those?
I mean, it could have won Critics' Choice. Those votes were in a month ago.
No, I don't think it would have won Critics' Choice because Critics' Choice is voted on by very online people, and they understand the temperament of online sentiment against that movie. Whereas DJ and PJ, are largely not, so they just would have voted in a vacuum.
But PGA voting also ended right when the tweets were dropping.
Yes, it did. So it's hard to tell what kind of effect that had. People could have gotten their votes in, or as is so often the case with people I talk to, they might have waited until the very end. I would venture to guess that Emilia was competitive at PGA still. And at DGA, I think it's, Sean's very likable.
He really is.
You root for Sean when you're in a room with him. I think he has that above all the other nominees.
Yeah.
This podcast is supported by the film Emilia Perez, the most Oscar-nominated film of the year. 13 nominations, including Best International Feature Film, Best Director Jacques Audiard, and Best Picture of the Year. The Times calls it a gorgeous musical epic from the French maestro Jacques Audiard. Winner of 4 Golden Globes and 3 Critics' Choice Awards, including Best International Feature and Best Original Song El Mal. Collider raves, Emilia Perez is a one-of-a-kind cinematic feat.
Okay, so who else was it a good weekend for? I was sitting near Adrien Brody at Critics' Choice and watching him go up there. I kind of wondered if he was walking away with the whole thing, especially because Timothée Chalamet was not in town at all. He hasn't been working these rooms at all, at least not this go-around. Do you think Best Actor is locked the way that Best Actress is?
Yeah, I do, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, for a couple reasons. One is, as you said, Adrian is here. You were at PGA's.
Yeah.
He came out to present, I think it was, again, a nominee presentation
for
for
Brutalist, yeah.
And he used his opportunity at the microphone to basically give an acceptance speech like he had won Best Actor.
He was so convincing, like so emotional and present. It was kind of amazing.
Yeah, but I was a little bit like, buddy, you're here to do a nominee presentation. You did not win. There isn't a win here. But you know what? Any FaceTime is significant, and he was getting it, and he was presenting, in that sort of emotional way. So look, those things are certainly helpful. But then also it's just like a historical thing, which is they don't like young guys. They want you to pay your dues. And certainly Chalamet has proven that he is a significant Hollywood star, that he is not like a featherweight, that he's going to be around, and that's something they want to see. But still, I imagine like it's akin to a DiCaprio situation where they'll want him to keep proving that, and they probably aren't going to give it to him until he's not a twink anymore.
They're going to make him win for his
real,
10th most popular movie.
Like they don't respond to that older cadre of Academy members. Certainly they love an ingenue, but they don't love a young guy. The last young guy who won was Adrien Brody, who he's up against. And I don't think Brody was thought of in the same way that Timothée Chalamet, who has been a romantic idol for years, in a similar way to DiCaprio was thought of. So I think it might be a similar arc for Timmy in that, like, they're going to want more age wisdom. They're going to want to wait till he's like worn down by life, and then they'll give it to him. Also, I would say, for as much as they love a complete unknown, the way that role is conceived in the movie is necessarily opaque. You don't get to know Bob Dylan in the same way that you get to know the other characters. It's kind of the point of the movie. And I think that somewhat hinders a Best Actor campaign in that you'd really want to know emotionally what the character is going through in a way that that movie purposefully holds back. You don't ever wonder, watching The Brutalist, what Adrien Brody's character is going through. And if you didn't get it, then he'll cry on stage while presenting the PGA nominee presentation, and you'll feel that emotion. So look, I mean, the sheer tonnage of screen time, emotion, what he goes through in Brutalist is certainly a more conventional Oscar package than what Timmy's got.
So then do you think Zoe Saldana righted the ship and got herself on track and away from the Carl Sofia Gascon mess? I kind of thought her Critics' Choice speech would be a little harder on the emotion. Like, she talked about the teleprompter, didn't see that coming. But it does feel like she showed up everywhere she needed to and did all the things she needed to stay where she is as a front runner.
Yeah, I mean, the Emilia Perez Critics' Choice acceptance speeches were a little bit too much about giving speeches.
They were so strange.
I was like, I don't think we need to be this meta. I think that if Zoe and Jacques are still listening to Netflix, which they clearly are, then Netflix should tell them maybe cut the first 45 seconds of what you want to say in an acceptance speech.
Don't bring 3 printed speeches on stage, which is what Jacques Audiard did.
Do whatever you want, but make that speech sing and lead with emotion, which certainly Zoe does. I mean, she did at the Globes as well. This is like a really meaningful moment for her.
Sure.
But yeah, look, I don't think that anyone in the industry would penalize Zoe for what's going on with Carla, and they all knew Zoe the best of anyone in that movie. And in the same season where Demi Moore is saying, like, it's so resonant to me to be thought of as more than a popcorn actress, certainly that is a narrative that Zoe knows all too well, you know, and she's a more contemporary version of that because she has been a popcorn actress in gigantic movies that we have all just seen and are still seeing. Very recently, So, you know, there's so many people who've worked with Zoe, from Marvel to Star Trek to Avatar, and they all love her, and she's getting their vote.
Yeah, they're not going to make her wait till she's in her 60s, the way that they did for Demi Moore. You know, you can make it happen a little bit faster for her this go around.
Well, in either case, it's not about their... I mean, with Timothée Chalamet, maybe they'll make him wait, but with Demi and Zoe, you kind of seize the opportunity when you get it. You know? I mean, Demi and The Substance, that's obviously going to be like one of the iconic roles of her career. And same with Zoe and Amelia, in that it's a gigantic, eye-popping showcase for what she can do, and you don't usually see her in a movie like that, so you'd better take the opportunity to reward her when you can.
Yeah. So to close it out, we can segue with Amelia Perez, talk about the piece you wrote last week about the role of fan armies in this Oscar campaign, whether it's the Brazilians or the Timmy fans or, you know, name the conclave memes. I don't know what it is. It does feel like we've kind of gotten past the Amelia Perez internet backlash phases of it into something else. But I mean, what do you make of these fan armies that are not Oscar voters that seem to have really shaped things this time around? Like, is that just the status quo now for Oscar campaigns?
Well, they have and haven't shaped things. I think the important thing to point out, which I think you and I both know, and we've said it before, is that, like, online is not... Like, Oscar voters are very offline people, by and large.
They have real jobs to go make movies.
Big online controversies might make nary a ripple in their world, you know? That is to say that if something is a big controversy on, like, X, and everybody that you know who's like a film person on X is talking about something, they don't give a shit. The only times that these ever really penetrate their consciousness is if it's appearing in, like, a trade publication or the Times or whatever over, like, multiple days. Like, if it's a long drawn out controversy, then people might pay attention to it.
Like the Carla tweets.
But the Anora intimacy coordinator thing, that's so not on the radar of, like, anybody. Although Judd Apatow brought it up in his DGA speech, so maybe. So something like the brutalist AI situation, I think that's a lot more of a thing for, so here's my really cynical interpretation of the brutalist AI situation. I think that the brutalist AI social media controversy was sort of tempest in teapot, motivated by a couple different things. One is that obviously the sentiment of the movie is about also almost auteurism, not just Courbet's auteurism, but the auteurism of Laszlo Toth as an architect.
Sure.
So anything that seemed to repudiate that, meaning like AI or, you know, some sort of creative shortcut, would be in direct opposition with the vibe and message of the movie, right? So that's a little bit of like already you've got, okay, here's what's spicy about this. But then there were, like, I think honestly, like a lot of bad faith social media exacerbators.
Imagine.
One is that I genuinely think a lot of people for whom The Brutalist had not come out in their city yet, or it came out for a long time, so they were resenting it, or they just didn't want to go see a 3.5-hour movie. Those people were thrilled to be like, oh, there's a reason. Now I have a justified reason to not go see this movie. It's like when people don't go to Coachella and they're like, oh, something shitty happened at Coachella. Great. I love that. Good, because I wasn't going to that anyway.
And this is all non-voters you're talking about. This is just internet people.
This is all internet
yeah.
people.
Got it.
This is part of why it got blown up into a thing online. So that's part of it. And then also, yes, I mean, there was like a Stan Army situation of like, I can't believe that Adrian Brody could win for his AI performance when Timmy was doing X and Y. Now, it did make its way into the trades, and Corbet did give a little statement to Deadline about it. And also, you know, like red carpet people or pretty online journalists, sometimes when they're interviewing these people in subsequent days or weeks, will bring those things up because they know that they can clip it and the internet will react. But I genuinely, in my estimation, that was not really affecting any of the voters I spoke to. Because honestly, I don't think people online get how much things are technologically manipulated in post-production on every movie.
People who actually make movies
every movie
read that story and said, this is just normal. This is what we know about this already.
Well, also, it's like so much is done to craft a performance that wasn't done on set when you're editing a movie. Simply taking 2 shots from different takes is a form of manipulation, is a form of changing the performance from kind of the initial way that it was conceived and delivered on set. So the idea of using AI to better the Hungarian accent, I don't think is a thing that anyone in the Academy would fault that movie for doing.
Yeah.
That's akin to special effects. That's akin to, you know, we didn't get the right sound on set, so we're gonna like futz with it a little bit.
ADR, yeah.
Yeah. You think an Academy with people like Peter Jackson and Guillermo del Toro are gonna be like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
They used Respicer. No, they're not gonna be like that. They aren't like that. So it was an online controversy that got blown up because of really avid fan bases, and we've had a lot of those this season.
Yep.
A wearying amount of those. I mean, but it's real because there are a lot of really turbocharged fandoms.
Yeah.
There is the Oscar fandom, which is always going to be a very turbocharged fandom. There are a lot of fans of a lot of young stars who are in contention this year, have movies in contention, whether that's Chalamet, Grande, Gomez. The Brazilians are in the mix now.
Do not underestimate them.
Do not. I mean, I have a private Instagram and it's inundated with follow requests from Brazilians like every day because they care. It matters. Every Brazilian I've ever met texted me the day of the Oscar nominations.
Yeah.
You know, it's a major cause to the lab that Fernanda and the film are in the race.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so the online situation is an interesting thing because not all of those controversies are ready for prime time.
Yeah.
Certainly the Carlos Sofia Gascon tweets situation was. And that's why I think everybody was so stumped that she had not been prevailed upon by Netflix or her publicist at Lead to have just wiped everything. Yeah. I remember speaking to a friend who was in contention, not this contest, but a previous one. And he said, do you have any advice for me? And I said, you should delete all of your old tweets. And he kind of laughed and he's like, well, but like everything from prior to this year? And I said, no, all of them. Yeah. He's like, well, why? I mean, I don't think I've written anything bad. And I was like, you do not understand the world you are about to enter. Yeah. That people will sift through everything you've said on social media. Like they have the wherewithal, the energy, and the interest to do so. And it doesn't matter if you had like a reply to someone's tweet once, which if taken out of context makes you look bad. If they like a rival movie more than yours, they will resurface that. And it might not make its way to Variety, but it could be like a thing that you wouldn't want to have to play defense on. Yeah. So just delete everything. And then he texted me the next day to be like, you know what? My publicist just told me to delete all my old tweets too. You were right. And so I'm startled that no one felt the need or was successful in prevailing upon Carla to do that, because she is such a clear, inveterate poster.
Oh,
she
yeah.
has and will post about everything. And you don't want that traditionally.
Well, you've probably heard the same thing from award strategists that I have, where they're all like, oh my God, this could have been me. I feel so bad for them. We're going to go through all the tweets going forward. Like, I think pretty much all of them understand exactly how this happened, even though to us it felt so inconceivable. Because Netflix, for all their resources, they don't have these same resources as Reddit, which has infinite people with all the time in the world to do this kind of thing. You really are kind of outmatched in terms of the ability to figure out what your clients are up to. It's a scary thing for them.
You only need one resource, and it takes 10 minutes, and that is signing up for a service that deletes all of your old tweets.
Yes.
And everyone should do it. I don't care if you're an Oscar contender or you're a listener. You should just delete all of your old tweets. What are we hanging on to? What sort of digital diary needs to be preserved? It's Twitter/X. It's a cesspool. It sucks. We shouldn't be on it as much anyway. Everyone should delete all their old tweets.
This is a good PSA.
Like, why hang on to any of that? Certainly, if you're an Oscar contender, you should. And I did see a little bit of that where people were like, well, should we be expected to look back at all of the old tweets? No, you should tell them to delete everything. Like, as soon as you're in contention, delete everything.
Or
even if you
least,
don't think you should.
Or
but
search
also
Hitler
just everyone
somewhere
should delete
in there.
everything.
Just, a couple keywords could have helped them out here a little bit.
Because it is the thing now where these turbocharged fan bases in Oscar season are very much akin to what you would see for like major pop stars. And you know that there's not a single bit of social media activity that a major pop star has made that has eluded the fan bases and the the people who hate those pop stars. And honestly, things are so turbocharged with Oscars now that it's akin to that. So you can't have done anything that, I mean, just everything can be dug up now. So why would you give them an opportunity to just like sift through so much of your uncensored, unkind thoughts?
Yeah. Weren't you expecting the Ariana Grande fans to play a bigger role in all of this? I feel like they've been cheering her on, but haven't been doing the like Oppo research that I thought they were capable of. I mean, there's still time. Who knows what might happen? But they've been kind of quiet more than I thought they'd be.
Well, I don't want to lay too much of this at the feet of any fan base. Even earlier when I was like, I think a little bit of the brutalist AI thing was motivated by Chalamet stans. Like,
sure.
I wouldn't lay all of that at the feet of them. I wouldn't say any of these are specifically motivated, but I just think that there is so much passion. There's so much passion from a lot of people who've really never paid attention to this race before. And it goes on for a while.
Yep.
So there's a lot to dig up. There's a lot of fights to be fought. You know, these are people who are used to fighting fights, who literally will log on and tweet 20 times a day or more about their favorite pop star or their favorite actor or whomever. And when you have them all in opposition to each other and they're all in each other's mentions, it creates this like terrible miasma. And I'm sure that many of these fans are like, kind, benevolent people who just want to see their favorite person do well. But I don't think kindness and benevolence gets a lot of retweets. Yeah. And so the things that show up in our, algorithms in our feeds and where you see people quote tweeting it or screen capping it tend to be the most outrageous, aggressive takes. And then everyone wants to get in on those, even if they're dunking on them, and it just magnifies it. Yeah. That's another terrible trend to this, which is like the most aggressive bullheaded take is the one that you see the most. Yeah. And just simply by platforming it to the extent that people do, even if they're dunking on it, it becomes almost like a status quo, like the watermark has been moved to a place where it oughtn't be moved to.
Well, it feels like we hit a level of misinformation with the brutalist AI thing that was like what's been in politics, where it's not true, but by the time you debunk it, it's out there, and the idea of AI being attached to this movie is there. And again, these are on the internet; they're not in real life.
But who's it there for? The internet.
Yeah. But knowing that these things can break through the way that the Carla tweets did, obviously like a more serious thing, it just feels like the Oscar race is getting more and more in the direction of political races where muddying the waters can kind of be the point. And Harvey Weinstein did that. Like, it's not new, but it's all kind of coming from a more chaotic place now.
A much more chaotic, much more decentralized place, because this isn't being spearheaded by Oscar strategists. And I still see people, I saw my friend Matt Bellany at Puck, who ascribed a potential nefarious Oscar strategist coaxed thing to Sarah Hagi, digging up those Carla Sofia Gascon tweets. And, I've spoken to Sarah, and she literally just did it because she had a hunch based on words that Carla had used. And it's that simple. Yeah. And I've spoken to, when there have been other online controversies, to Oscar strategists who are like, I know exactly who made that happen. It was so-and-so at so-and-so. And it's like, no, it wasn't. It was the online people. Yeah. Even the Oscar strategists do not live online, so they don't totally understand this environment. They don't understand that people are digging up all this old stuff simply because they want to. Yeah. They're not being fed it by another Oscar strategist. The other Oscar strategists, who are also older, also don't know that any of this is happening. So this is a very online situation.
Yeah. It would be fun to think there's a puppet master making all this happen. But as with everything on the internet, it's way more hard to follow than you would expect.
Yeah, there is no puppet master, or maybe everybody is their own individual puppet master. But it's a very different vibe where the strategists are playing defense, and they're doing it on a playing field that they frankly do not recognize.
I am realizing that if it does take Timothée Chalamet another 15 years to finally win his Oscar, the Chalamet stands are going to be so powerful by then. Like, we got to watch out. They're going to have so much influence over the race by the time that happens.
They'll be very powerful by then, and then everything they've clowned on Club Chalamet for being, which is an older Timothée Chalamet fan, they will themselves be.
It all comes back around to them. Kyle, thank you for being the voice of This Weekend when I barely have one, and for coming on. Let's talk more about this next time.
Absolutely.
That does it for today's episode. Thank you for putting up with what's left of my voice. I promise to get better soon. This podcast is edited by Brett Bukes and produced by Brett Bukes and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my co-host, Kyle Buchanan. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We will have another bonus episode this Saturday. See you then.